The Subcommittee on the Federal Workforce, U.S. Postal Service, and Census will come to order. I'd like to begin this hearing by stating the Oversight Committee mission statement. That's how we start out all of our meetings. We exist to secure two fundamental principles. First, Americans have a right to know that the money Washington takes from them is well spent. And second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them. Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers because taxpayers have a right to know what they get from their government. We'll work tirelessly in partnership with citizens watchdogs to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the federal bureaucracy. This is the mission of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. At this point, I'll recognize myself for an opening statement. In addition to its namesake activity, the Census Bureau conducts a number of monthly surveys for the federal government. Perhaps the most important among them is the Consumer Population Survey used to calculate the national unemployment rate, one of our most important economic indicators. The collection of this data is critical to both Main Street and Wall Street, and ensuring its timeliness and accuracy is the responsibility of the Census Bureau. Unfortunately, in November of last year, we heard allegations that senior officials in the Bureau's Philadelphia regional office were instructed that the senior officials were instructing field workers to falsify survey responses. After hearing these allegations, the Oversight and Government Reform Committee and the Joint Economic Committee launched a joint investigation. Our investigation found that data falsification did occur, but fortunately there was no evidence that this falsification was pervasive or systemic. I want to be clear on this. The committee found no evidence that the falsification was on an order of magnitude close enough to affect the national unemployment rate numbers. Nor, thank goodness, was there any evidence of a systemic plot in support of some grand political scheme. However, we did find substantial problems in the Bureau's data collection and review process, problems that unfortunately create a very real incentive for managers to overlook or even possibly encourage data falsification by field staff. The Bureau needs to take swift corrective action and measures to address these vulnerabilities. Data integrity is mission critical to the Bureau, the government, and America as a whole. Even the appearance of inappropriate or impropriety or inappropriate activities or lingering questions about the trustworthiness of Census Bureau data is unacceptable. As a nation, if not the world's preeminent statistical agency, the Census Bureau's methods must be above reproach. The committee staff report, released earlier today in partnership with the Joint Economic Committee's majority staff, identified a number of flaws and provided recommendations that would address these concerns. Chief among the findings was the data review process does little to discourage data falsification. Namely, supervisors who assign work are also responsible for reviewing data quality. And they're paid on the basis of completion speed and response rate of the surveys that are worked on. This creates an unacceptable incentive for unscrupulous managers to ask field staff to falsify data with the promise the manager will cover for the falsification. If successful, this scheme would improve alleged response rates and allow workers to complete surveys faster, though with little basis in reality. Under the current system, the people responsible for maximizing response rates are the same folks responsible for maintaining data quality. They're expected to do a job with two conflicting objectives. That's not good policy and not good management. Obviously, most census workers and managers are doing the right thing. They're fulfilling their commitment to data quality. But we cannot expect every one of them to do the right thing when policies and procedures incentivize doing something else, or at least turning a blind eye to it. Quality control needs to be outside the chain of command. As our friends at the Inspector General's office pointed out in their report, the Bureau does things differently for the decennial census. They have a separate unit responsible for quality control. That's logical. That's good policy, and that's good management. It makes sense, and that should be the policy for all surveys. Census Bureau practices also bring into question just how committed the Bureau is to committing data falsification. Its employee training barely makes mention of it. They still rely on carbon paper-based forms to track suspected falsification. I hadn't seen one of these in a while. Apparently they still exist. And they've also got some issues with disparate computer operating systems that don't interchange data well. The Census Bureau needs to send a very clear message that it's serious about the quality of its data and the integrity of the census. It's my sincere hope that today Director Thompson will be able to talk about the ways the Census Bureau is actively taking steps to address data integrity and other concerns raised by this subcommittee and the Inspector General. At this point, I'll yield to Mr. Lynch, ranking member. Actually, before we start, Mr. Lynch, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that our colleague from Minnesota, Mr. Paulson, be allowed to participate in this hearing. And without objections, so ordered. Mr. Lynch?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you for holding this hearing to examine the Census Bureau's data collection and quality assurance procedures for the current population survey. And I'd also like to thank our witnesses for being here today to discuss the findings and recommendations issued by the Department of Commerce Office of the Inspector General and the progress of the Census Bureau in implementing these recommendations. Over the past year, as you've noted, Mr. Chairman, there have been a number of allegations made against employees within the Census Bureau. A November 2013 New York Post article made several of these allegations publicly. And as the Chairman has noted, these allegations were thoroughly investigated by the Department of Commerce Office of the Inspector General and were found to be without merit. I would note that the Inspector General, Todd Zinser, was appointed by President George W. Bush in December of 2007 and is with us here today. In particular, after reviewing over 3,000 pages of documents and conducting more than 100 interviews of former and current Census Bureau employees, the Inspector General's office issued its final investigative report in May 2014, which was appropriately entitled, quote, "Unsubstantiated Allegations that the Philadelphia Regional Office Manipulated the Unemployment Survey leading up to the 2012 presidential election to cause a decrease in the national unemployment rate," close quote. This report, again, I quote, "found no evidence that the management in the Philadelphia Regional Office instructed staff to falsify data at any time or for any reason," close quote. The Inspector General also found, again, this is a quote, "no evidence of systemic data falsification in the Philadelphia Regional Office," close quote. Again, another finding, they found no evidence that the national unemployment rate was manipulated by staff in the Philadelphia Regional Office in the months leading up to the 2012 presidential election. The Inspector General's report further determined that in order to manipulate the unemployment rate, this is a quote again, it would have taken at least 78 Census Bureau field representatives working together in a coordinated way to report each and every unemployed person included in their sample as employed or not in the labor force during September 2012. The report adds that this effort likely would have been detected by the Census Bureau's quality assurance procedures. The Inspector General also found that the decline in unemployment rate was consistent with other indicators, such as the payroll estimates by automatic data processing and Moody's Analytics. So in any case, if anyone is keeping score, the New York Post allegations were determined by the Inspector General to be 100% false. Moreover, the Inspector General has also reviewed the Bureau's data collection and quality assurance procedures and issued several recommendations to the Bureau to protect against data falsification. I think it is important to recognize that the Bureau agrees with these recommendations based on Director Thompson's testimony. The Bureau has already adopted 2 of the Inspector General's recommendations and is currently working to implement the other 4 recommendations, and I look forward to hearing the details surrounding each of those recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Paulson has an opening statement as well. You're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Fernthal. My comments come in relation to the Joint Economic Committee's interest on this issue. So I'll address the comments to Chairman Issa, Subcommittee Chairman Fernthal, Ranking Member Cummings, and Subcommittee Ranking Member Lynch. Thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing on behalf of the Joint Economic Committee. The Joint Economic Committee has a vital interest in the accuracy, relevancy, and timeliness of U.S. economic statistics. The Census Bureau produces many economic statistics, including monthly statistics on U.S. international trade in goods and services, manufacturing sales and inventory, and construction. The Census Bureau also collects the data used to calculate other economic statistics, such as the gross domestic product by the Bureau of Economic Analysis and the unemployment and labor force participation rates by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Congress uses these statistics to make decisions about federal spending and taxes. Both corporate executives and small entrepreneurs use these statistics to decide whether to open a new store, build a new factory, or hire more workers. Families use these statistics to decide whether to buy a new house or how to invest their retirement funds. Since so much of economic decision-making relies on statistics produced by the Census Bureau or based on data collected by the Census Bureau, allegations that the underlying data may have been falsified and thus the economic statistics based on such data may be inaccurate are deeply troubling and deserve congressional scrutiny. That's why the Joint Economic Committee joined with the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to investigate the allegations published in the New York Post on November 18, 2013, that a Census Bureau employee may have falsified responses to the current population survey used to calculate the unemployment rate, the labor force participation rates, and other employment statistics prior to the 2012 presidential election. While this investigation did find serious structural problems and systemic deficiencies with the Census Bureau's data collection processes, especially with respect to the Bureau's ability to detect data falsification, we found no evidence that falsification occurred with the intent to manipulate the U.S. economic statistics, nor was falsification sufficiently widespread to question the validity of the statistics generated from the population survey. The staff report makes 5 important recommendations to assure the integrity of data collection. Checks must be put into place to prevent any conflict of interest between achieving a high survey response rate and reporting incidences of data falsification. Specifically, clear procedures should be established for staff at any level to report potential falsification, and the re-interview process, which helps to identify incidences of potential falsification, should be independent of the chain of command. While achieving a high response rate is important, it should not trump the integrity of the data collected. Implementation of these recommendations would encourage Census employees to report any suspected falsification and would help Census managers to detect and correct any fraud. 2 other recommendations specifically address the accuracy and effectiveness of the Bureau's record keeping. First, though some improvements have been made to ease to case tracking systems, the Bureau could do more to ensure that all notes and files associated with a case are tracked. Second, the current paper form used for reporting suspected falsification must be made electronic and tracked such that employees suspected of falsification receive a timely and just investigation into the matter. These particular recommendations would serve to increase transparency and accountability within the collection process. And then finally, Census Bureau and the Department of Commerce should indeed improve their responsiveness to congressional oversight. The Census Bureau has subsequently taken some steps to ensure data quality, but real deficiencies remain. I urge the Census Bureau to implement all of them promptly, and I'm interested in learning of any current or future plans from the Census to improve data collection and quality control procedures. America does rely on economic statistics produced from Census data. The accuracy of these statistics must be beyond reproach. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Other members will have 7 days to submit their opening statements for the record. I will now recognize our panel. The Honorable John Thompson is Director of the United States Census Bureau, and the Honorable Todd Zeisner is Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Commerce. Welcome, gentlemen. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses are to be sworn before they testify. Would y'all please rise and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record reflect both witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you all, and you may be seated. In order to allow time for discussion and questions, we ask that you hold your testimony to as close to 5 minutes as possible. Your entire written statements will be made part of the record. In order to abide by the 5-second rule, you all ought to have timers in front of you. The green light means you're good to go. The yellow light means about a minute left. The red light means stop as soon as you can get to a reasonable place to do so. So we'll start with you, Mr. Thompson. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau, thank you, Chairman Farenthold, Ranking Member Lynch, and the subcommittee for inviting me today. I appreciate your ongoing support of the Census Bureau, and I'm pleased to be able to tell you about our data collection and data integrity efforts. In my 27 years as a civil servant at the Census Bureau and in the year since I was appointed director, I have come to be extremely proud of our agency and its employees. They are dedicated, qualified, mission-focused public servants who provide an invaluable service to the American people. Thanks to them, the Census Bureau is one of the federal government's foremost sources of quality statistics, and I am extremely proud to lead it. The Census Bureau emphasizes integrity in every one of our data collection efforts. This is true of perhaps our best-known activity, the decennial census. It is true of the economic census, which we conduct every 5 years, and of the American Community Survey, the nation's premier source of community and neighborhood level data. It is also true of the Current Population Survey, which I will discuss today. The Current Population Survey, or CPS, is administered by Census Bureau field representatives. The typical field representative works part-time and earns about $15 an hour. Their average age is 57, and many of them work for the Census Bureau to supplement their retirement or other income. They are members of their local communities, and they are the face of the Census Bureau to every home they visit. And as such, we hold them to high standards of performance, professionalism, and courtesy. Recently, the Department of Commerce's Office of the Inspector General, or OIG, investigated an alleged data falsification in the CPS. This matter was immediately referred to the OIG. After months of investigation and more than 100 interviews with current and former staff, and as you will hear shortly, the OIG concluded that these claims were unsubstantiated. They found no evidence that the Census Bureau management had instructed field representatives to falsify or manipulate data. As part of their review, the OIG also evaluated the procedures that we use to detect falsification and made 6 recommendations for improvement. The Census Bureau wholeheartedly agrees that these suggestions will further strengthen our data integrity. We have already put 3 of the recommendations into practice and are implementing the other 3. For example, we now immediately suspend work assignments to field representatives who are suspected of falsifying data unless and until they are cleared by an internal investigation. We have implemented the Unified Tracking System, or UTS. It provides a view of near real-time cost, progress, and response data, consolidating data from other production systems, and over time and across surveys. This is a powerful tool for monitoring employee performance and detecting anomalies that may indicate falsification. In addition to the UTS, we maintain detailed keystroke data, which can also be used to investigate falsification. We generate UTS reports that field managers use to monitor the quality of our interviewers' work. We have updated and will continue to update our training materials, and we are automating the process for reporting falsification, known as the Form 11-163. We have improved how we monitor and limit field representatives' workloads to avoid circumstances that might encourage shortcuts, such as data falsification. We are improving our quality control process so that data collection re-interviews are now independent from the chain of command, and we are on our way to centralizing these efforts. Finally, we are sending regular reports to all of our survey sponsors, such as the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the case of the CPS. I also want to assure the members of the subcommittee that all field representatives receive guidance on reporting improprieties, including data falsification. New employees complete a training that includes how to report fraud, waste, and abuse and to the Office of the Inspector General, and also receive an administrative manual that includes a specific section with specific instructions about reporting fraud, waste, and abuse to the Office of the Inspector General. And this manual also includes the hotline number and a link to the website. At the Census Bureau, we welcome scrutiny and oversight of our work. I sincerely appreciate the OIG's suggestions. They are a clear, practical roadmap for improvement, and they will help the Census Bureau build on its already excellent work. Thank you for this opportunity to address you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. And Inspector General Zinsser, you're up. Did I get your name right, Zinsser?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Farenthold, Ranking Member Lynch, Mr. Clay, and members of the subcommittee. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today on vulnerabilities in census data collection and quality assurance processes. As you and Director Thompson have noted, one of the many surveys the Census Bureau conducts throughout the year is the monthly Current Population Survey, also referred to as CPS. Earlier this year, on May 1st, my office publicly issued a report of investigation concerning allegations that the Census Bureau's Philadelphia Regional Office engaged in widespread falsification of CPS surveys, including the manipulation of the CPS unemployment rate in the months leading up to the 2012 presidential election. My written statement summarizes the allegations concerning the Philadelphia Regional Office and the results of our investigation, observations we made related to Census Bureau falsification policies, and recommendations stemming from our investigation. The key allegations we investigated concerning the Philadelphia office included, number one, were census field representatives instructed by their supervisors to falsify data? 2, did members of management alter completed surveys to manipulate data? And 3, did any alleged data falsification of the CPS in August and September of 2012 have a measurable impact on the unemployment rate leading up to the 2012 presidential election? We conducted over 100 interviews of current and former Census Bureau employees in the Philadelphia Regional Office, headquarters, and other regional offices. We reviewed training materials, interviewing procedures, quality control processes, and performance assessments. We also conducted extensive analysis of census CPS data and BLS employment statistics data, as well as other data relevant to our investigation. While our investigation did not substantiate these allegations, we did identify several vulnerabilities with respect to the Census Bureau policies and processes and made a series of recommendations. We made the following 4 observations. 1, survey supervisors do not consistently use the tools available to them for detecting and preventing data falsification. 2, field representatives suspected of falsifying data are sometimes allowed to continue conducting surveys while the matter is under investigation. There is not a consistent practice across offices. 3, the regional office quality assurance process creates the potential for a conflict of interest because the same supervisors who manage staff and could direct the falsification of survey data are responsible for reporting instances when their staff falsifies data. And 4, CPS procedural manuals and training materials are outdated, inconsistent, and do not discuss the serious consequences of falsification. We made the following 6 recommendations. 1, implement a formal policy that prohibits employees suspected of falsification from collecting survey data during the investigative process. 2, update procedural manuals and training materials to inform field representatives about the consequences of committing falsification. 3, implement an independent quality assurance process for all survey operations similar to the one used during decennial census operations. 4, ensure that all survey supervisors are properly using all available tools to safeguard against falsification of survey data. 5, implement internal controls to effectively monitor and limit field representative workloads in order to reduce the risk of falsification. And 6, implement a reporting mechanism for confirmed data falsifications to those organizations that sponsor Census Bureau surveys. As noted by Director Thompson, the Census Bureau agreed with our findings and is in the process of implementing our recommendations. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I would be happy to answer any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned your investigative report. I have it here. I'd like to enter it into the record without objection. So ordered. It's good to actually be up holding a hearing in this committee where we find out the situation isn't as bad as we initially thought. Unfortunately, in some of our other hearings, it turns out we're afraid the situation is worse than we initially thought. So this is actually a happy occasion for me to be chairing this subcommittee hearing where, yes, there are problems, but it's not as bad as we thought. Mr. Thompson, I'd like to start with you for a second. I think a lot of the issues that we saw in the VA, and I think we see in some areas of the government, is what the culture is within the organization. And y'all testified that you do have training materials early on for your new recruits to talk about the issues with data falsification and how to report it. Typically, how long is a new hire trained?
Congressman, I will have to get back to you on that.
My concern is the data falsification 5 minutes in a 2-day training, or is it something that's pervasive throughout the training? And that's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, so we have revised our training to emphasize data integrity. In fact, we are implementing a form that each interviewer will sign, and they will re-sign it every year, that explains to them the importance of data integrity and the dangers in falsifying data.
And what are the consequences to an employee caught falsifying data?
It's a fireable offense.
Okay. That's good to hear. Now, you talk about your UTS system, your Unified Tracking System. It's my understanding that tracks who assigns what and who completes what cases, but there are actually 3 other systems, the Blaze file, which is the actual survey response, and the Trace file, which is a time-stamped keystroke log. These are 3 separate systems, right? And how do they talk to each other, or do they?
That is one of the next steps in our process, is to put together a method for making these systems talk to each other. However, I have to say that we are continually revising the way in which we analyze the data from our unified tracking system to provide more and more useful information to our field managers.
Great. And it's also my understanding that regional offices are responsible for both data collection and quality control, and that they often have conflicting objectives. Most Census Bureau employees are evaluated at least in part on survey response rates. The Census Bureau can minimize the potential for conflict of interest by separating the interview from the regional chain of command, thus allowing quality control to function independently. It's my understanding that y'all have started in July a pilot program where there's a re-interview process that comes out of your Jacksonville Connect Center rather than the regional offices. Do you think this initiative has been successful so far? Can you give us an idea how it's working?
Certainly. We have already moved 2 of our regional offices to the Jeffersonville facility.
That's in Jacksonville. I'm sorry, I just read that.
That's okay. Where a totally independent staff will do the telephone interviewing. And by by April 15th, this coming April, we'll have moved all the regional offices to our Jeffersonville facility.
And have you run into any problems, or is it working out pretty well?
It's been working very well.
Great, great. And then the other question I wanted to get to is Commerce Department officials, one of the committee's witnesses reports that they faced retaliation after she cooperated with the committee's investigation. Can we have your commitment that you'll work with our staff to ensure that Bureau employees are not retaliated for whistleblowing and cooperating with Congress?
Certainly, Congressman.
All right. We had a hearing the other day in the full committee on the difficulties that some whistleblowers face, and this committee is almost unanimous in believing that whistleblowers need the the highest level of protection, that they are our partners in being watchdogs. So with that, I'll go on and let Mr. Lynch have his questions, and I'm going to check to make sure we've gotten everything I need to get covered as well. But we'll go to Mr. Lynch now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go back. This was basically the headline back. Let me see. This is just prior to the election, where it says the census faked the 2012 election jobs report. The implication being that census employees falsified the records, and then their goal was to manipulate the unemployment numbers so that President Obama would get reelected. That was basically the conspiracy that they alleged. So I want to just drill down on that a little bit. I think that's very unfortunate, and gives freedom of the press a bad name. Mr. Zinsser, let's just go back over your report a little bit. I just want to straighten the record out. So after reviewing over 3,000 pages of documents and conducting more than 100 interviews of former and current Census Bureau employees, your office found this is a quote from your report, no evidence that management in the Philadelphia regional office instructed staff to falsify data at any time for any reason. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And can you explain to me briefly what led you to this conclusion?
Well, we asked employees about two main allegations. We asked them whether they were ever instructed to falsify data, and none of the employees that we interviewed said that they had been so instructed.
Now, most of these employees, are they newly hired since President Obama took office, or have they been there a while?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but they were a cross-section of employees picked at random throughout the region.
Okay.
And there was no other selective factor there in terms of how long
good
they've
enough.
been on staff. The other issue that we asked them is whether they had any concerns about their completed surveys being altered by their supervisors, and none indicated that they had such concerns.
Okay, and then you check with the managers to see if there was any changes implemented by them?
Yes, sir. There were three managers who were essentially the subjects of the investigation. We did interview each of them. They cooperated with our investigation. They denied any efforts to instruct employees to change surveys. They denied that they had ever changed or altered surveys themselves.
Okay. You also indicated in your report, contrary to the New York Post allegations, that there was no evidence that any of this data was used to manipulate the unemployment rate leading up to the election.
Yes, sir. We went into the investigation understanding that theoretically it could be possible to manipulate the unemployment rate.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What would it be required? What would have to happen in order for that number to change? I understand it's a broad-based broad-based data, and the indicia of unemployment is sort of a blended number. What would be required for manipulation to actually happen?
Well, actually, the Census Bureau did an analysis, and then our staff evaluated that. And basically, the average workload of a CPS field representative or field representative that works on the CPS, the average workload is 30 cases. So if the unemployment rate is 8.1 or 8%, that means of those 30 cases, 2.4 of those cases, you're going to find somebody who's unemployed, 2.4 out of the 30. So in order to change the unemployment rate by just 0.1%, it would take 26 field representatives changing all of their unemployed cases to employed. And then in order to get a 0.3% decline in the unemployment rate, you'd multiply the 26 times 3 and you'd come up with 78.
Okay.
Field
And
representatives.
that's what we had there, right? At that time, we did have all the indicators were the same, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Well, they're all consistent. I wouldn't say they're the same, but they were all consistent if there was a drop in unemployment.
Yes, there was a drop from 8.1% to 7.8%.
Okay. All right. I see my time has expired, and I will yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Clay?
You have to take a phone call. He'll be right back.
All right, then I'll go. I do have a couple more questions I'll do, and then
Sure.
We'll go back to Mr. Clay when he gets back. Mr. Thompson, is there any computer management or electronic falsification screening? For example, in the Consumer Population Survey, households are in for 4 months, out for 8, and back in for another 4. Does any screening occur automatically to identify inconsistencies over the period the households in the survey, or you want to talk about any other automated data integrity systems you have in place?
The systematic processes that we use are, right now, are preparing reports from our unified tracking system that are designed to identify anomalies that we can look at. We are working aggressively to put together more of a data analytics team that will then allow for a really more systematic way of doing this.
Great. Mr. Zinser, we've heard testimony in other hearings about inspector generals having problems getting their job done and being blocked. I just want, your testimony tended to indicate that you had pretty good cooperation. Did you run into any roadblocks in your investigation, or feel like there are folks not cooperating with your investigation?
No, sir. We didn't have problems with cooperation early on, and I think the staff report kind of points out that the general counsel's office of the department did get involved in the investigation, and we did make sure that our investigation was completely independent of anything that office was doing with respect to the committee's oversight.
And Mr. Thompson, we didn't have quite as good of experience, or at least the committee staff reported to me that despite the Census Bureau having its own legislative affairs staff and lawyers that ordinarily handle the Bureau's engagements with Congress in this committee, in this case, the Commerce Department stepped in and assigned its own staff to manage the congressional investigation. Their posture toward the committee's investigation, according to committee staff, was confrontational from the onset. The pace of the committee's investigation was slowed because Commerce Department officials slow-rolled document productions and interfered with witness interviews. Did you or your predecessor request the Department of Commerce to manage the response to the committee's investigation?
Congressman, we always work closely with our colleagues at the Department of Commerce, and in fact, our attorneys administratively do report to the Office of General Counsel to ensure consistency. We basically followed the procedures that were in place for responding to the subcommittee.
So you're saying it is standard practice for the Department of Commerce staff to take over management of these types of inquiries, or is it just, was it a takeover, or was it just cooperation?
It was cooperation. It wasn't a takeover. We have a very good relationship with the Department of Commerce.
And did the Department of Commerce tell you why they jumped in on this one more than they had in the past, at least dealing with us?
I didn't have conversations with them about anything like that.
All right, and the department, they didn't express any concerns with y'all's legislative affairs folks and them handling it, did they?
No.
All right, well, I was just kind of curious why they jumped in on this one. All right, I see Mr. Clay is available now. We'll give him his first round of questions and then give Mr. Lynch his second if he's got some more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Director Thompson and Mr. Zinser for being here today. However, Mr. Chairman, I'm just kind of bewildered on how and why we are at this point. As the ranking member stated earlier, I guess this inquiry started from a November 18, 2013 New York Post article. And it seems to me, it appears as if quality control may be needed at the New York Post Clearly, the information contained in the article was not reliable, and I see that some of the history of how we got to this point was in response to that Post article. On November the 19th, 2013, Chairman Issa, you, Mr. Chairman, and Kevin Brady sent a letter to Director Thompson seeking documents related to possible employee data falsification in the CPS. And in response to that request, the Bureau has produced over 4,800 pages of documents. And the committee has conducted 6 transcribed interviews with current and former Census Bureau employees. And I did hear you say earlier in this hearing that this is good news. And so I was just, I'm just curious as to how we got to this point off of a unreliable New York Post article.
If the gentleman will yield, again, as I did point out, we found that the problem was not nearly as bad as the New York Post suggested, but I think we are having this hearing to ensure that some of the reforms from the Inspector General's report and a result of this investigation are going to be implemented. It's our duty to conduct rigorous oversight, and as I said at the onset, I'm glad it didn't turn out to be as bad as we all thought it did, and it's actually pleasurable for me to have a good news hearing, and I do think, for the most part, this is a good news hearing.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, because I think the people at the Census Bureau work awfully hard to get it right, to supply this government and the American people with the data necessary to make good decisions. You know, over the past year, we've heard a number of allegations against the Census Bureau as it relates to a potential data falsification scandal in the Philadelphia regional office. However, let's set the record straight. There was no scandal here. The IG conducted what I think we would all agree was a very thorough investigation, and the allegations were found to be without merit. And after reviewing over 3,000 pages of documents and conducting more than 100 interviews of former and current Census Bureau employees, the IG found no evidence that management in the Philadelphia regional office instructed staff to falsify data at any time for any reason. Is that correct, Mr. Zinser?
Yes, sir, it is.
And can you please explain what led you to that conclusion?
Yes, sir. We followed our investigative plan, and that included interviewing current and former employees. It included interviewing the managers who the complainants had pointed to as instructing them to do this. We actually, the managers actually submitted to polygraph examinations as well. And we also looked at the actual computer files with respect to an analysis of whether any changes had been made to any of the files, and we did not find any evidence of any alteration of the survey results.
And in your investigation, did you find any evidence that management changed survey responses or covered up falsification?
No, sir, we didn't. As I mentioned, we did go into the computer systems and looked at the trace files, which are actually audit trails, to see the activity of the supervisors, and we did not find any occasions where results had been altered.
I thank you for your response, and I see my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clay. Mr. Lynch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is unfortunate, as my friend from Missouri has pointed out, that a news report would lead us to this point there. But separate and apart, I think this is, as the chairman has noticed, this is a good news hearing, And I think it was important to lay this all out because there has been a steady drumbeat of criticism for government employees and agencies. Government employees in the last several years have endured furloughs. They had a 3-year pay freeze. The pension contributions for all these federal employees have been increased, so they're paying more for their pensions and getting less at the end of it. But it's very important to make sure that people understand that these reports were baseless. So the good reputation of the census employees involved in these cases were sullied because of the allegations made. We have done a thorough investigation congressionally and through our inspectors generals, and the claims against these employees were completely baseless. So I apologize to those census employees that had to endure this, and I would just caution that sometimes the environment in which federal employees have to work is hostile to their morale and also to their performance of their duties. So I guess my confidence in the employees of the census is reaffirmed. I think they have performed exceedingly well their responsibilities, even during this during the time of these allegations. They've done a good job. Our inspectors generals have done a commendable job as well to be thorough in their analysis, and I think that the recommendations are the best thing to come out of this, other than absolving the Census Bureau of any blame here. I think the recommendations are sound. I think it'll end up allowing us to really have greater confidence than we had before, and eliminate any possibility that there might be manipulation in the future. So I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for your indulgence, and thank you for holding this hearing.
And thank you, Mr. Lynch. Mr. Clay, did you have any more questions? I do not. All right, and while I agree almost completely with Mr. Lynch, I do want to point out that this investigation was not a waste of time. We got some good results from it. We learned that there are some potential problems that need to be addressed in training, in implementing management issues. I think we've made a good step by having a completely different division doing the callbacks for data security. We're well on the way to improving our computer systems, so I certainly don't think it is a waste of time.
Mr. Chairman, briefly, I forgot, I neglected to offer the opening statement of Mr. Iser, our full committee ranking member, and I'd like to offer that as part of the record.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Ranking members.
Mr. Cummings, right. What did I say? Mr. Iser.
I
wish he was a ranking member, yeah.
Wishful thinking on your side, I guess. We're happy to have Mr. Cummings as the ranking member. So without objection, this will be entered into the record. I'd like to thank our witnesses for taking time to be with us and for your hard work for the hardworking American taxpayers. We are adjourned.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.